I do want to say really quickly that Nick has upgraded to bourbon. He now drinks Manhattans.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, next time we hang out, we'll have to do a Maker's Mark Neat to see how you're doing.
I think I had a couple hairs pop up my chest too after Friday.
Wow.
Look at that. So proud.
As he drinks his Mio. All right.
Bourbon and Mio. Oh, bourbon and Mio.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Cold Call Show, episode number 3, where we share the truth about sales. Doesn't matter if you've been doing it for 10 years, you just got started, or you're having one hell of a month, like Christian. Today, we're talking about compensation, how you're getting paid, and to really know your worth. Who's getting this one started?
I'll start it off.
All right.
Before we can know your value, we got to understand how we're getting paid. The different commission types, pay structures that are in sales. So we basically broken it down to 3 main overarching commission types or pay structures. One is, of course, your 100% commission. Your
hello to all you realtors out there.
Realtors, absolutely.
And 99 reps.
You have your draw commission structure, or declining base structure, if you will. And then the holy grail is your base plus commission.
That's how you know you've made it.
That's the ideal. That is the best scenario. So why don't we kick it off? Nick, I think you have worked a job that's 100% commission. You want to go into that a little bit with just the experience that you had there and how you got paid?
Yeah, so that was a unique one. It actually started out as a base plus a commission, and then they decided to move everybody over to 1099, and we were all 100% commission. So importance there is really understanding, what percentage of your sales do you end up getting, and realizing how fast you're closing deals, what's a typical deal size, to understand what I'm going to bring in. I was completely commissioned when I was like 18 doing energy sales, and I think I was in it for about 3 weeks before I decided I'm in college and I need steady income, and I pulled right out of there, so I had a different job.
Technical difficulty. All right. I hope it wasn't a really awkward face.
I mean, it was pretty rough. Yeah, you could
So Nick was telling us about how commission only is rough as hell.
I mean, if it's something that like you are passionate about and you maybe been in the industry for a while, you know what you're doing, you know what to expect. I mean, there was a guy in my company who had made like 300 grand by July. But as an 18-year-old rep just starting out, it's like, I can't afford to have a week where I make $20.
Yeah. And
So
that's the interesting thing about cut jobs with that kind of pay structure is, they're obviously the attrition is really high, but those are also some of the ones where people make the most money. Even things like device reps, realtors, again, apparently energy stuff, you make a crap ton of money. But yeah, if you can sort of get that ball rolling and get it off the ground, then the sky's the limit, because they'll keep paying you as long as you keep closing business. They don't care.
And this could be unpopular opinion here, but I know we're just talking about the straight commission right now. But if you think about it, all 3 pay structures, we're talking like everyone's so polarized by all 3, right? It's base and commission. I'll never do a straight commission job. I never do a draw job. But at the end of the day, all this stuff all really kind of impacts you in the very beginning, right? Because if you're successful in it, like Christian, you're talking about a realtor, if you build up a book of business and you start having referrals, guess what? It doesn't really matter if you don't have a base, because you could be making more than the guy with base plus commission. It's more of like a question of like how you're getting started with straight commission. Like Nick said, you're making just $20. It's going to be rough if you're coming straight out of college and you're trying to pay off debt. But if you are transitioning jobs and you have a book of business, you could go straight 1099. It doesn't really matter if it's base commission.
Yeah. Or if you've got someone for whatever reason, you have some kind of flexibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, controversial opinion, but if you have the drive and the determination, and you're willing to deal with a few months or a year even of maybe some unequal income, like, and you're someone getting out of college or something, like live at home for a year, and like until you get a steady book of business up and running, and it would probably suck for a while, but if you're at the right company with the right product and you put in the work, you could end up being way ahead of your peers.
True. Yeah. And I am going to echo Josh, what you said. So I needed a base plus commission starting out because this company that I'm at now, that I started out with 7 years ago, I didn't know the industry at all. And if you don't know the industry, you don't have a book of business, you need a place that's going to give you a safety net for a little while you're learning it. And really, it took me a year until my commission level was even something that I could live off of. So that first year, I was living off my base, which was nothing. I think I got paid 30 grand coming out. So, and I was getting commission the whole time, but it was a slow, steady ramp up until after the first year, I could live off of it. Now, thankfully, my base didn't go away, and it's actually gone up in time. So I see when my commission fluctuates, I had a trough where I lost 40% of my commission over a 6-month period. That hurt, but it didn't hurt as bad as if it was just a commission only job. I always had that base. And what a lot of people do is, if you're extremely smart and your base keeps going up and up and up, is to control your spending habits to where you're living off of what your base salary is, and then commission is all the extra gravy.
You beat me there.
So
now lifestyle.
My mind was there as you were going.
Like we were all just like talking, like we're literally all thinking like financial advice.
This is a finance podcast now, guys.
I mean, once again, salespeople, like, we're not afraid to talk about money, right? And I think that's part of it, is that you're going to have hot streaks, you're going to have not hot streaks, right? You can't just live at the point of like your highest commission that you've made, in 1 month.
So what's that one in the middle? So we talk about draw commission. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, none of us have had a job that has been draw commission, but I think we all know people who have been in jobs with draw. A draw is basically that the company is fronting you a salary and not paying you any commission until you've hit a certain level, until you've eclipsed what they've paid you in a base. And sometimes it declines, or sometimes it vanishes after a certain period of time, that base, to where you're just living off of commission, whether it be 3 months, 6 months, a year, depending on the job or the industry. I think we were talking about it earlier, but I think we all know people who have been in that setup before. Anyone want to jump in on that?
I don't know if I've known anybody particularly that was in it, but there were people that were recruiting out of the professional selling program for that, and it was never something that was interesting to me. I just felt like it's almost kind of like not being decisive. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like it's either go with a base plus commission or just go straight commission. Like,
well, what I think it is, and the reason some companies do it, is that really in an ideal world, they would rather be a commission only shop, and they want to do that, but they need warm bodies for whatever reason, because that's where they see the numbers at, and or the sales cycle is longer, right? Where you need to give someone a 3-month ramp up period so they can start closing business for, whatever that kind of product or service that they're selling. From what I've heard about from people in those kind of positions, is that usually it tends to be a little bit of a meat grinder environment, where it is warm bodies, phone calls, like there's not a ton of differentiation. You're going to have some guys who are going to crush it like always, but it's definitely a higher pressure type environment. It tends to be, because they're coming people in and out, right? And there's a number attached to your head, probably more so than in a lot of other positions where we had talked about it. If you don't hit your number in 6 months, that's it. Boom, bye. Nice knowing you.
I'm reading something right now that basically says research shows that on average, sales reps ramp up to full productivity in 9.1 months. So in essence, the company's keeping your commission checks during that time, while you're ramping up until you hit a certain level. Now, if you crush it in your first 3 months, you'll earn on top of that. You'll earn some of that commission on top of your draw.
Right.
Because you've eclipsed the amount that the company's outlaid for your base salary. And it's a way for companies to effectively pay you for commission only while still retaining you as a W-2 employee so that you can get benefits, stock, things like that, health insurance. Whereas if you're commission only, you're a 1099 employee. This is all tax code stuff. So you can't get benefits. You don't have all the protections of being an employee.
So do the thoughts on selecting one of these different ways to get paid change on where you're at in your sales career? Is it when you're graduating, all of these look just as appetizing because you just need to get started, like you're saying, Christian? Or is there a certain lifestyle that or certain, let's say, debt that you need to pay off, and a base is like, that's the only way I can guarantee I can pay off my base or my debt?
The bank loves a good W-2 when you're trying to get a mortgage. That's real life.
That is also true.
Very, very true. Yeah, it's tough if you're a realtor. I've seen it happen where literally realtors,
hilariously, realtors of all people, right?
have trouble getting approved for home loans because if they've just started or done a career change, they don't have income until they sell houses, right? So they're selling houses all day, every day, and sometimes in the first 6 months after doing a career change, can't get approved for a loan because they don't have any income, no W-2s. So
I think the base plus commission, I mean, nowadays that's probably by far one of the most popular if you're going after a legitimate company with the AE or big time sales role where you're not working at like a retail store. But then too, it's when you're going in and you're looking at that, knowing how much you should be getting paid based off of what you're expected to bring in is a big thing. And that can also help arm you in your negotiation if you know what the rest of the industry is paying versus what your company is.
So good segue. So how do we research that, right? How do you judge yourself in the company that you're looking at against other companies in the industry?
You guys familiar with Skybridge? They're pretty knowledgeable in industry.
Oh. Skybridge Resources staffing company?
Yeah. Reach out to your local recruiter.
Tampa, Orlando, Atlanta, and Louisville, and Denver.
Because people just think you want to talk to recruiters about jobs, but really they know what's going on in the industry, and they're talking to millions of people all day long. Maybe not all day long because that's a lot of people, but they know what's going on in terms of like average salary. And then, of course, I know Nick has had an experience with a couple that maybe might not be completely aware of what's going on in the industry. So it's kind of like a toss-up, but like go talk with your recruiters because they're talking to other salespeople and other companies all day long.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're working at a big enough company, you talk to your HR recruiter, your internal recruiter, develop a relationship with that guy or girl because they're talking to people all day trying to attract them to come into your company that you're at now.
I think the other thing that you can do, so every industry and sort of structure, I think, has its own rules of thumb, right? So, for example, in software and SaaS sales in particular, the general rule of thumb that I've noticed seeing people is that it'll be usually a base plus commission role, right? And then usually your on-target earnings will be about 2x your base salary, right? Which usually puts your quota at anywhere between 5 to 10x your total comp if you're on target, right? So at that point, you can start reverse engineering what the comp should be and what your comp is at your company versus what other people in similar industry are doing.
Yeah.
And that's just an example because that's the industry I know, right? But you can sort of break it down and figure out, well, where am I at versus other people or other people? Because you can see job postings that are like, hey, the base range for this job is 50 to 70 or whatever, right? And then, okay, I can do the math backwards and figure out what their total comp plan is probably for that if they're a company that's similar to mine.
So there's another wrinkle too when it comes to commission in the comp plan is, I mean, you guys are talking about software sales. I'm talking about staffing. When it comes to some of these, you talk about enterprise level deals, I've talked to a lot of guys who are sales reps for Oracle. And the deals that they're selling are, I mean, some of their quotas yearly are $5 to $10 million based on their industry segments. And that's no sweat, because they're sometimes selling to government level, right? So, making 20% of that, it can be, can happen, but more often than not, their net effective compensation is less than that. And there's a lot of gimmicks that companies can do, like sunsetting commission.
You just brought up a great point. So this is something I've been thinking about for a little bit, but sort of a rule of thumb is a red flag for me when I look at commission structures and I'm looking at companies and things like that is the more complicated the commission structure, usually the less excited I am about that role.
And is there a cap?
Capped commission, are important. Capped commission and sunsetting of commission. You guys are in software sales, so you talk about your recurring revenue.
Mm-hmm.
How would you feel if some of that recurring revenue, some business that you've had for 2-3 years, all of a sudden, that doesn't count anymore because that's been sunset?
Well, it depends on the company. Some don't count it. Some only give you, commission toward new business, for example. Some people separate the role where they have account managers for current business versus, account executives for new business.
True.
So there's a lot of different ways to handle it, but, you have to be smart when you go into any situation and reverse engineer what they're telling you, right? How much am I actually going to make? Like, what does this mean? Like, what does this look like for other reps? Like, especially if you're interviewing somewhere, I don't see anything wrong with reaching out to someone in a similar role at the same company that you're at and say, hey, I'm interviewing. I'd love to have it, buy you a coffee and talk a little bit and ask them, like, how are things going? Like, are people hitting quota? I don't think that's unfair. Like, it's your life and they don't want to answer you. That's fine. But I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I agree.
You never know what people like the story that management sells you for a company versus what's actually going on.
Could be different. Well,
it could be very different.
Gimmicks too.
You need to do your research.
The gimmicks that you talk, like sunsetting commission, I was familiar with a company that it would eventually drop to like from 4% down to 1%, and it all makes it more complicated. We kind of talked about this, but the more complicated it gets, the more frustrated reps get. And I still remember being on like the leadership side where we'd have to have these conversations, and they kept calling it transparency. Reps were calling it transparency, but really, when you sat down with a rep, that one of your good reps, and we're like, hey, honestly, tell me what's going on. And they're like, I just don't know what I'm going to make. A year and a half ago, I could add up my commission and I could tell you what I was going to get in the next month based on my own performance. Like, I could do it myself. Now I have to call into the office and have them run numbers on like certain things that are reimbursable and things that are not. And then what's going to sunset in the next 12 months to go down to 1%. What am I getting paid? And when you make it complicated and you add all this stuff in, it just makes the reps feel a little more uncomfortable. They're not really trusting what's going on with leadership. And I really think that it kind of impacts other pieces too. Because the next time leadership says something about, I don't know, next training class or something, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, really, what are we actually going to learn there? The lack of trust starts to build if you can't even add up how you get paid.
When's the last time the comp plan changed too? How often does that happen?
Yeah, you can ask, and are the commission reports public? Are they all hidden? Do you know what everybody else is making? I mean, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. A lot of enterprise companies, not everybody knows, not even everybody in sales knows, except for the sales managers and directors. At my company, we share it every week, and everybody knows what everybody else is making. But we celebrate it. It's like we're a sales organization. We celebrate it. When somebody hits a certain goal, we're high-fiving. We'll pop a bottle of champagne in the office. It's great.
First job, that was exactly how it was. Like you would religiously look at your numbers on your phone, but you could look at all the reps. You add up because it was so easy to do it, but you'd add it up and you're like, they're doing 600K. You know it. They're crushing it, and you're just like, wow, I want to be there. I want to be at that spot. And that's just how it was. Like, you didn't have to go talk to them about it because that's how easy the commission structure was. You could add it up and you're like, that person's crushing it. That person is not what's going on over there. And it was as transparent as possible. Why hide it? You're salespeople.
Because, I mean, comp structure is part of how you create incentives, right? And that's the other side of that coin, right? Is that salespeople are always going to try to game the comp structure to their advantage, right?
Mm.
Of course.
Like if I'm more incentivized to close 3 big deals in a month instead of 20 small deals, that's what I'm going to do. Because if that's how my comp structure works, right? Or vice versa. Maybe the company is after smaller accounts and like that, they want volume, right? Great. And I think maybe what sales managers need to keep in mind too is like when you create that structure, you need to think about what type of behavior you want to incentivize, right? And if it's not transparent, maybe the behavior they want to incentivize is people leaving.
Very true. Very true. Well, so how do you do that? You talk about being frank with your sales manager. Maybe somebody's gone and they understand what their comp plan is. They have researched and maybe they're underpaid. Maybe they want to negotiate a raise. Maybe they're just interviewing for a company. Those are really the 3 different times. And there's a couple others, but negotiating raises, negotiating adjustments to their comp plan. You're either going to do it at the beginning of your job. You're going to do it after you've been there for a little while and you've been crushing it and have some data to back it up. Or maybe when your job duties change and you feel like you need a boost or an increase. So 3 different times. Let's start with the first one, negotiating at the beginning of the job. Where do we have the most leverage? What can we negotiate for up front that might be easier when you're doing it at the beginning of about to start a job?
So recruitment person in this industry, is it easier to negotiate while you are still currently at a job or while you are unemployed?
Oh, still currently at a job. For sure. For sure. People tell me all the time, well, I don't need to leave, but if you could bring me a 50-20% increase, I would move. So yeah, you can definitely, I think you can negotiate your base maybe a lot more at the beginning of a job. Some of the things like changing your percentages in the comp plan, that would be harder. Changing your percentages of commission, that's harder to do when you're applying for a job. Because usually it's fairly well set. But certainly the base, something like stock options, that's another thing that you can negotiate for. Usually you're not going to negotiate any type of extra annual bonus or that's usually performance based once you've been in there for a little while. But I think base salary and stock are the 2 main things that are easiest to negotiate up front when you're starting a job.
I think you touched on a point there too, where if you are looking at moving and someone's trying to get you to relocate, I think you definitely have, I recently did this, where you can really negotiate what that relocation is or that signing bonus. If someone says, yeah, you have a year 1 signing bonus that is $20K, you're like, yeah, but I have all these expenses to move. Is there anything that we can do around that? And they could turn around and say, well, your signing bonus is we're basically locking you in for 2 years. So sure, we'll give it to you all up front. But if you leave in 3 months, you're going to owe it back to us at some point. So I think when you are negotiating that base right at the beginning, other than just what the company might be able to twist around from the 3 or 4 different ways they might incentivize you, it's if you're going into a SaaS company and you're going from financial tech to marketing tech, what's a typical marketing tech percentage of base to quota, and making sure that you are in line with it or maybe a little above it if you're a proven performer.
Good point.
Does the conversation change at all if it's, let's say, an established company versus a startup too? I feel the established company is probably going to have this path for you, right? So like if you're asking the right questions in an interview, and let's say you're on your last one, you get an offer, you have a pretty good idea of, what senior AE would be, or then the next level up from there. So you have a pretty good understanding of what the different tiers are in base. So not saying that there's not room to negotiate, which Nick has recently proven otherwise, but there's still a little more of a narrow hallway for you in terms of like what the base would be. Whereas a startup is kind of like, here's the window we can kind of move with this, including the stock options and things like that. And I think they're more important to negotiate up front, especially on the startup side, because it's 7 months.
Oh man, here's something important about the startups, Josh, and this is, I think people, especially people with less experience, might not realize this, but Startups are always going to sell you on the dream, right? They're like that. They're selling you the dream that like we're going to blow up, we're going to be $1 billion, we're going to be a unicorn, right? Right. So, however, and this is something that I think at various points some of us have learned the hard way. Unless they are giving you stock up front, like not a what's it called?
Option.
Right. Not options where, in 5 years you earn them over. No, unless they're giving you stock up front, because that's actual cash they're giving you, right? I strongly believe this. Never take a below market value compensation at a startup unless they're giving you stock up front.
Or on performance too.
Because,
Oh, there's somewhat of an argument. If they're going to give it to you on performance up front, that's another one rather than just like.
Well, well, that's different, right? But if it's like, oh yeah, well, it's just time, like literally like the amount of time that you rot in the office chair.
Versus
that's how you get
stock. Vesting
right.
stock where if you leave or anything like that, you have to actually purchase it still.
Yeah, that's a stock option. All stock option is an option to buy at the current price when you start. And that's great if the company blows up and you're there 5 years later and gets sold. It's not great if you leave after 2.5 years and it's not vested at all. Have you guys ever successfully negotiated a raise or a commission structure change in your job? Or unsuccessfully?
I think I've had a little bit of both, actually. Yeah. I've had definitely failures there where it didn't work. I didn't get what I asked for. I didn't present it the right way. But then there's definitely been other times where it was as simple as just saying, hey, look, this is the base. I'm counting on the base to pay X, Y, Z. And I need more money. How can you help me out? And they were really transparent back and like, this is what we can add to it. And the other conversation was more about like, this is what I'm worth. This is what I've done. This is the business that I've closed before. This is the industry that we're looking at right now. And I was turned down. They're like, no, there's no way. Okay, well, that's fine. So I think I've won and lost both. I definitely, I think, tried to use data both times. And then not only data on what has been closed and showing my value, but also what's going on around us. Because I think that shows that you're knowledgeable too. That it kind of shows your skill set too, that you're knowledgeable in the industry and you understand what's going on. But also the fact that, okay, you've got some kind of statistics behind your name, which that's all we are, really. It's salespeople. It's like, what have you done? I know they say, what have you done lately? But at the end of the day, our resume is really, what have we done in the past? Like, what have we actually closed?
So what are other things that you can negotiate? Because, we obviously talk about base salary. What other things have you guys negotiated or seen negotiated?
PTO, my friend.
PTO.
PTO's real.
Very true. Paid time off, personal time off, whatever you want to call it.
Everything's on the like once you're talking, hey, this is what our budget is. This is what and you start like everything's on the table. Like get all of that stuff. Like it's going to be all written, right? If they send you an offer letter and you're looking through it, it's like, and if it doesn't say, what your benefits are, like what your health, like ask everything. What's your PT? Like how many PTO? How does that work? How does like you need to know everything. And there's like, if anything, like if I was a decent human being who's a sales manager and I sent someone an offer letter and they started asking questions about how I would think that, great, this guy is detail oriented. Like he's money motivated. Like this is what I want from someone. Because when they go to sign up a customer, they're going to go through the same process. They're going to go through all the T's, cross all the I's, whatever you want to do. I know I did that backwards, but that's fine. Detail oriented.
Yeah. Well, we asked the same thing. We asked those things during our interview process. And if we have a candidate, this is internally for us, if we have a candidate who's extremely interested in the comp plan, we like that person because they want to know how they're getting paid. It shows interest. So yeah, base, PTO. I had a couple others I was jotting down. Nick, you mentioned, what's that?
In sales, you are often so in demand. And if you're moving to a company, you might be, whether you're in the field or you're moving to their headquarters, you might have to move too. So relocation or an initial sign-on bonus is something
for sure.
Definitely negotiate.
Relo, absolutely. True signing bonus I've seen before, but it's a little bit more rare unless it's tied to a move. And usually there's
Mick got it.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think in signing bonus, it really depends on how you're going to be paid, because typically you'll either have like a 1 or you'll get a signing bonus for your first 2 years. But a part of that is they also expect to lock you in for that amount of time you have that signing bonus. So if they're already making you commit to that, you have a little bit of flexibility to negotiate how you're going to get paid your signing bonus. So for me, it was talking about relocation. And so I was like, you know what, if I could have some better cash flow up front, it might make it a little more appealing. So I went from getting a signing bonus paid over 12 months to a signing bonus in 1 paycheck.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, that's what a signing bonus is to me. To me, a signing bonus is you're getting paid this within either your first 30 days or they're paying actuals on, on your relocation expense. That's more relo. If they're paying actuals on something, that's a relocation expense. It doesn't come into your pocket at all. If they're giving you a check, up front, if they're direct depositing money, and you're not necessarily up front, but within your first 30 days, that's a signing bonus. And usually there's stipulations with the signing bonus, like you have to pay it back. You owe the company money if you leave within a certain period of time. Some others, we talked about stock, options versus shares. Shares obviously they're yours. They're vested right away. That is stock in the company, versus options being just an option to buy that stock at a later date. Not as good.
Price, yeah. Not as exciting.
Not as exciting. There's also annual bonuses, monthly bonuses. It's just you understand those things and ask if there's an opportunity to have that increased, as opposed to maybe a base salary. If they can't hit that, you can negotiate potential monthly bonuses or annual bonuses in there. So all those are great things that you can ask for, but what happens if you get denied? What if you have all the data, you've done your research, you are armed with what you want, and you go in either to your current boss's office for requesting a raise or some type of commission increase?
I hold my breath and stomp my feet personally.
Get blue in the face?
Yeah.
I say, that's not fair. I just walk out the other way. No. I think this is, and it just recently happened because obviously I'm lucky enough to, have a new opportunity here shortly. But before this, I was basically told no to one because I was asking something that I thought I deserved. I think there is a very clear line of, maybe it's not that clear, but what are you worth kind of thing. Like how much can you actually be asking for? If you're 5 years out of school and you've closed, I don't know, $1 million worth of sales and you've made $85,000 before as a base, I think it's pretty fair to ask for the same amount of base, maybe a little less if it's a new industry. But if you go and you're like, nah, I deserve 120, then you're probably going to deserve that no. So it kind of depends on like what you're asking for and like where you've been, like what is your actual worth? Because if they turn around and tell you no for something that is pretty fair, and of course you ask around to and doing your research, then that's not the opportunity. That's not the company you want to be with. You can go somewhere else that's going to pay you a good amount of money. And I keep thinking about Nick's offer. Like Nick's got some experience, a year and a half out of school, and turns around and gets this crazy offer. I mean, that's awesome. Why not take it? There's definitely companies will look at salespeople and be like, you're worth the money. I'm going to pay you this money. And there's other people that are just like, as to Christian's point, I'm going to get you at a discount. And if you don't want it, I'm going to find somebody else that's going to take the discount.
For whatever reason.
I think there's a middle area there too, where maybe you're not being underpaid, but your comp isn't as good as you'd like it to be. I think we talked about off podcast, or Brock brought it up, where a really good point is if they say no, and if you really want to get to that point, or maybe you need to get to that point, you can then create a 3 or 6 month plan with your boss on how can I prove that I'm actually worth this base, so that in 6 months from now, I know I'm going to be promoted to that.
Yeah, get it in writing.
Yes.
So true, though. It is really
true.
true.
Remember that time we were at coffee and we talked about that raise? No, I don't actually.
Yeah.
Like,
Your sales manager should want you to do better, right? And it's
Right.
like, if you can come up with an action plan to say, hey, this was my goal this year. I hit it. I want a raise. No, you can't have a raise. All right. Well, if my goal for this year is X. If I do 10% above that, is that enough justification for you to give me the raise? And you can be a little bit more blunt than that. I think that is justification for it. How can I get there? And get it in writing, get it on paper.
And like you said, the great way to approach it is, okay, if that's not, then what is? Like, how do you determine this?
Right.
Because people get raises. That's a thing that happens in real life.
And asking, not necessarily creating a plan, but asking the graceful way of asking why. You can just straight up ask, well, so what's the holdup now? Or what would it take to get it in 6 months without even creating a plan? That what would it take to get to 6 months? That's probably going to allude to the why, and they'll probably give you an answer of, look, you don't have the experience yet, or you haven't closed X amount of business. Okay, so if I close X amount of business in the next 6 months, does that mean I get that $5,000?
Right.
No.
Absolutely.
Okay, well then what else do I need? Like, you know, I feel that, yeah, I mean, there's definitely like, do you take the no? No, of course not. You still got it, but I think there's
you're in sales. You don't take them. You never take the no.
Yeah, but I think somebody will, though, because I think having a conversation about salary is kind of challenging. It's tough to talk about money with a superior, especially once you already signed something, because you're like, do I deserve
especially
the
when
other money? Do I deserve the other? Yeah, of course you do. You've worked hard. Ask for it.
I feel like we could talk about comp and negotiating salary and all this. We could sit here and talk about that for days. So I guess what are the big takeaways for people, for the young and the spring chickens out there, the spring turkeys, if you will, the fall turkeys,
the fall turkeys and the spring
Do
chickens.
your research on your industry and company. What's the industry saying you're worth, and are you getting that?
Right. Talk to other people. Don't be afraid to invite somebody out to coffee and pick their brain about how their comp plan works.
I think another one, we didn't really touch on this, but especially for entry-level people, find a job with a title that will make sense to other companies that you want to work at.
That's a very good point.
And lastly, just I think having a conversation. So taking all the information everyone's talking about anyways, knowing your worth, talking to other people, what you actually want in terms of salary, and having the actual conversation. Because you could say it's just like buying a piece of property. Like, you can paralysis by analysis kind of thing. You can sit there and do all the research. You can talk to every single person, know all the numbers you want, and then not have the conversation that you need to have. So you can go and hit them with all the data, but if you don't ask for what you want, what salary you want, what you particularly need, or maybe creating a plan if they tell you no, just walking in and having a strategy with how you're going to present this is pretty important.
Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to the Cold Call Show. This was episode 3 from all of us here. Signing off.
Hanging up the phone.